listener production.
Hi, Sasha Barbagat with you. Welcome to The Briefing. For most of this year, Bitcoin, the most well-known cryptocurrency in the world, has been trending downwards in value. But over the last 2 weeks, it's been surging. Why? Well, many are pointing to Donald Trump's election win. So is it all down to the Trump factor? That's coming up in the second half of this episode. First, though, let's get into the headlines with Chris Spiru on Monday, November 18.
Morning, Sash. Morning, everybody. Happy Monday. And we're kicking off this week with some great news for our cash purists in Australia. Under a new government mandate, businesses selling essential goods and services like groceries, medicines and fuel will be forced to accept cash payments from January 1, 2026. Not 2025, 2026. It is subject to exceptions, though, taking into account a business's size and actual ability to follow it. So it's expected that many small businesses will likely be exempt from this. The Treasurer has released a statement describing cash as a lifeline for millions of Australians, especially those living in regional areas, Sash.
Yeah, and as well the elderly who still prefer to use cash rather than card payments. I know my grandparents definitely do. Look, currently businesses aren't forced to accept cash in Australia, but if they do refuse, they must offer an alternative at no fee to the customer. Right now, government data shows that up to 94% of businesses still accept cash. For some reason, this has become like a real bugbear of a lot of people, but being like, well, cash is being phased out. But as we can see there, 95% of businesses still accept it. And look, around 1.5 million Aussies still use cash for more than 80% of their in-person payments. The greatest use is in regional areas. Also, out of this statement is that Treasury has confirmed cheques are going to stay in circulation for now. Something else my grandparents still do is send me a cheque on my birthday, which is really annoying, but bless them, thank you so much. But look, circulation of cheques will taper off in 2028 and they'll no longer be accepted after September 30 of 2029. Right now, though, the focus is going to be on determining what constitutes an essential good or services for these cash payments, for this mandate that the government wants to bring in. So that's going to start now.
Yeah, and I think watching how that list shakes up and what ends up being on the list and off the list is going to be really interesting to watch. And I think the last few months, and with all the outages and internet outages and bank crashes and stuff, we've seen just how fragile our online systems can be and our online payment systems can be. So it's situations like that cash purists turn out and go, well, I told you so. And people like our grandparents go, damn kids these days, if you only listen. So, yeah, interesting to see.
But yeah, it's worth noting more than 3/4 of our payments are made with card and just 13% with cash. And that's 2022 data from the RBA. So I'm sure it's more than that now. So look, most people are using card, but the government's going to ensure that people can still use cash where they really need to.
With 2 months left in office, Joe Biden has just authorised the Ukrainian military to use long-range US missiles to strike Russia. The decision is a major departure from existing US policy and is designed to help Ukraine defend its forces in the Kursk region of Russia. These missiles are likely to be used not only against Russian troops, but also those who have been sent to join the fight from North Korea. And if you want to know why North Korea is getting involved in all of this, we did a deep dive at the end of October. Just search why North Korea is sending troops to fight against Ukraine. And look, this all comes as over the weekend, Russia hit Ukraine with its biggest missile attack since August, hitting critical power infrastructure, which is a major war move as winter is rolling over in those countries at the moment.
Anthony Albanese is facing pressure to reveal his government's plans on emission reduction targets. Right now, we know the government's plans up until 2030, which includes a 43% reduction, a target of net zero by 2050, and 80% use of renewables by 2030. But there are questions now about whether Australians will know what the aim will be beyond that. But the PM wouldn't be drawn on it while speaking on the ABC.
Our focus is on achieving the 2030 target because 2030 comes before 2035.
Yeah, that was yesterday. Under the Paris Climate Agreement, Australia will have to reveal plans for its 2035 target sometime next year. Labor's now under pressure to reveal it to voters before the election. The Prime Minister has spent the weekend at the APEC summit in Peru, where climate change featured heavily in discussions among the 21 countries in attendance. And the COP29 summit has also been happening in Azerbaijan, while the G20 is about to get underway in Brazil.
And details of what Kamala Harris spent on everything from private jets to Uber Eats in the final days of campaigning have been revealed. First off, aside from spending on things like advertising and interest groups, the biggest bill was her flights, and those came in at over $4 million Australian dollars in her final days of campaigning. Not surprising given she was jetting all over the US to visit battleground states.
Yeah, and it brings the total bill for her private air travel for her 107-day campaign to over $18.5 million. Her team also dropped $18,000 on Uber Eats, another $18,000 on ice cream, and almost $100,000 on a hotel room and catering in Delaware when Biden was still running for office. Now, it's believed she spent about $2.5 billion all up. Remember, she had a lot of that money raised for her. That's a really big thing in the US, is making donations to political parties for presidential campaigns. Of course, as we pull apart all her figures, no one's done the same thing with Donald Trump. This was put together by Murdoch-owned newspaper, the New York Post, so maybe we can see a bit of an agenda playing out there. Speaking of, US politics and the kookier side of it, Trump has hit a UFC event over the weekend with billionaire buddy Elon Musk in New York.
And ladies and gentlemen, look who is now making his way to the world-famous octagon, flanked by UFC CEO Dana White, 45, soon to be 47, President-elect Donald Trump.
Yeah, he was flanked by the tech mogul Musk on his left, UFC president, as we heard, Dana White on his right. He also took along a few of his cabinet picks. RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard and Vivek Ramaswamy were all there to, celebrate the win, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe that's, and people were making the connection while all these important climate talks were happening, Trump was at the UFC. I'm like, but he's not president yet.
No.
He should just enjoy the time off while he has it.
Trump was out there pulling out his signature dance moves to YMCA, something that we know he has a closeness to. And I'm glad that we're going to be seeing that, happening throughout his presidency as well.
Speak for yourself. Thank you, Chris. Next up, we're keeping the Trump theme going. We're talking about crypto and why it's surging since he won the US election.
Hey, Bension here. For a solid 7 months of this year, it looked like cryptocurrencies were trending down. The value of the oldest and best-known cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, had been broadly trending downwards since March. But over the past couple of months, and especially over the past fortnight, Bitcoin has surged to record highs. So in this episode of The Briefing, we're bringing you two experts to explain what's going on with crypto right now, what to know about crypto in general, and whether those of us who didn't buy into crypto years ago have simply missed the boat. Bryce Leske is co-founder of Equity Mates Media, which focuses on investing and finance for young Australians. I asked him what is going on with crypto right now.
Two major things are happening right now that are leading to, I guess, the frenzy that we're seeing in the market. The first is the US election and Trump being the president-elect. And then the second is we are in the midst of the 4-year Bitcoin cycle. So I'll start with the Trump side of things. I guess investors are quite enthusiastic about Trump becoming president because he has pledged to take a bit more of a hands-off approach when it comes to digital assets. And I think, if the government are saying that they're going to be easing regulation, and I think he's been quoted as saying he wants the US to be the crypto capital of the planet. I mean, if that's not going to get people enthused, then I don't know what will. So investors are now anticipating that regulation changes are going to come and make it easier to invest in and also use cryptocurrencies for all sorts of things. And then the second is this 4-year Bitcoin cycle. And this is probably the more technical side of things. And I imagine if all those crypto maniacs listening now would argue that without the election, we probably would be seeing similar price action at the moment. And that's because historically Bitcoin moves in 4-year cycles. And we are now at the 2-year mark of the current 4-year cycle, and it's all based on what they call this halving event, where every 4 years the supply of Bitcoin is reduced. Well, not reduced, but it's harder to mine Bitcoin. And so that puts pressure on the supply. And of course, we know when there is a supply pressure, prices start to go up. And so this happens every 4 years. You can look at the chart, it's quite phenomenal. And so arguably, we are looking at a period over the next sort of year and a half of some pretty incredible price growth before, as you said at the top of the show, it comes crashing back down to earth. So a lot to consider there, but those are the two main things.
So I also asked Dr. Cynthia Chai, Senior Lecturer at Macquarie University's Department of Applied Finance, why is crypto so volatile? What makes it go up and down so dramatically?
Well, you actually ask a very good questions because Bitcoin itself is just a digital record, the record of money. It doesn't have any physical forms. It's a lot like the gold. It's a lot like the paper bills that is being backed up by the government. So it's just the string numbers of letters and numbers. That's pretty much. When people have the belief there is a values, people is happy to pay some prices to buy it. But when such a belief might be all in a sudden be changed, so it will become nothing. And we call it Bitcoin doesn't have any intrinsic value because itself doesn't generate any future cash flows.
One of the things that is kind of the orthodox received wisdom about investing in general is that you should put money into something and then not touch it for a really long time. Is that the same with cryptocurrency?
It's totally different philosophies. The one you mentioned is very classical. We call the Warren Buffett investment philosophy. And he is also one of the big persons who is totally against the ideas of the Bitcoins or cryptocurrencies investment. So I think it's up to you whether what type of investors you want to be or what is your, say, investment risk tolerance. If you prefer to invest in some long-term assets without worrying all those fluctuations, volatilities, maybe you shouldn't touch the cryptocurrencies, including the Bitcoins at all. If you are more like a short-term investors, like you love to rebalance your assets in the short times, you enjoy the very high risk, and also it means possible high return per se. If you are those type of investors, yes, you can consider about Bitcoin. But again, I would like to warn everyone who is considering about investing in these cryptocurrencies. It's very risky market, and the return can be go up 20% per day and can be also decreased by 50%. So you have to be careful about that.
Despite its volatility, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies have made a lot of people very rich. People often have stories about someone they know making a lot of money or losing a lot of money on crypto. Just anecdotally, a friend of mine made enough with a $100 investment in Bitcoin years ago to have a house deposit. But that was years ago. So have those of us who never got on the bandwagon just missed the boat?
I had a mate at university who kicks himself because he actually bought a full Bitcoin for $100 and then was so excited when it went to $120 that he sold it. And he looks back on that moment. And can't believe what he did. But no one was to know back then when it's $100 that it would become the asset class that it is. It is one of the largest asset classes in the world now. And so there's moments throughout that whole period where you could have said, I've missed the boat. The frenzy in 2017, the frenzy of even, 4 or 5 years ago, the frenzy that we're in right now. So I think there's things to consider if you do want to invest in Bitcoin because, as I said, like there's technical fundamentals behind it that should indicate that over time the price does continue to rise. The fact that we now have some of the largest asset managers in the world creating products that allow people to invest in Bitcoin is only going to increase the pressure on demand, this 4-year cycle that I've been talking about. So it's really now entrenched in the, financial ecosystem. So to say like we've missed the boat, I don't think that's correct, but I think there are ways that you could invest in it now that will minimize the risk that if you just go all in when things are frenetic, that you don't lose all of your money. It's just that saying, best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, second best time is now. I'm not saying now's the right time to buy crypto, but there are going to be opportunities.
Overall, Bryce and Cynthia emphasise that crypto is a risky investment. And if you're thinking about putting your money towards it, make sure you're prepared for the consequences of that bet.
The whole market is actually driven by the sentiment. It's not driven by the real values. It's very different from the share market or the commodity market that people are more familiar with. So when you're thinking about that, ask yourself whether you can control your emotions, whether you can control your investment behaviors in a proper way. If you feel uncomfortable, better not touch it.
If this is the first time that you're going to be buying crypto, don't put all of your hard-earned savings into Bitcoin in one go. Perhaps think about putting 10% in and understanding how it works, and then putting 10% into the stock market as well. Just don't put it all in one go. And there are a lot of people out there promising guaranteed returns in the crypto market. So just be aware that that is not necessarily always true. And again, that kind of comes back to the lack of regulation around cryptocurrency and people being able to be a bit cheeky when it comes to the products that they offer. So yeah, a few things to consider. But if you're in it, be prepared for an absolutely wild ride because, as I said, and as you noted as well, the volatility in these markets is crazy. It's not uncommon to see it shoot up 15% in one day and then the next fall 20 or 30%. That is not an unusual thing for this asset class. You need to be able to stomach that.
Bryce Leske, co-founder of Equity Mates Media there. You also heard from Cynthia Chai of Macquarie University. Just to note that the information in this episode is general, it's not financial advice. Consider your individual circumstances and speak to a financial advisor before investing your money. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. Before you go though, we'd love it if you could share this app with someone you think might enjoy it. As always, you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and on TikTok and YouTube. Search Listener Newsroom. We'll be back in your feed this afternoon from 3. I'm Bension Siebert. Catch you next time.
Listener.